The stars looked different from the bridge of the meridian's edge, and Dr. Kethver knew why. His tall frame bent over the scanning console as he studied the blue planet that had caught the attention of the Zephyrian collective for over 30 years. Earth spun slowly below them, its surface covered in swirling white clouds and deep blue oceans. The beings living on this world had no idea they were being watched. Kethver's translucent skin glowed softly in the dim light of the ship's control room. His forearms moved quickly across the controls as he gathered the final data he needed for his report. The humans down on Earth were strange creatures, much smaller than his own people, with only 2 arms and thick, solid skin. They seemed weak and primitive, yet they had somehow built machines that could travel between the stars. Behind him, the communication array hummed to life. A shimmering image appeared in the center of the room, showing the grand chamber where the Galactic Council met. Dozens of different alien species sat in floating chairs, all waiting to hear what he had learned about these new creatures called humans. "Honored Council," Kethver began, his voice carrying the formal tone required for such important meetings. "I have completed my study of the species known as humans. They live on the 3rd planet of a small yellow star, and they call their world Earth." The council members leaned forward in their seats. New species were always interesting, but it was rare to find one that had developed space travel on their own. Most civilizations were invited to join the galactic community only after they had proven themselves worthy through centuries of peaceful development. "These humans are indeed primitive," Kethver continued. "They fight wars among themselves. They damage their own planet, and they show little respect for other forms of life. However, they have somehow managed to build ships that can travel faster than light. This is most unusual." On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, staring out at the endless black of space. His brown hair was starting to show gray at the edges, and his blue eyes held the tired look of someone who had spent too many years traveling between the stars. The ship around him was humanity's newest and best, built for exploring the unknown regions beyond their small corner of the galaxy. "Captain," called Lisa Park from her position at the navigation console. She was younger than Morrison, with short, black hair and quick, intelligent eyes. "We're getting something strange on the long-range sensors. It looks like a ship, but the design is nothing like anything in our databases." Morrison walked over to look at her screen. The image showed a sleek vessel with curves that seemed to flow like water. It was beautiful in a way that human ships were not, as if whoever built it understood secrets about moving through space that humans had not yet learned. "How far away?" Morrison asked. "About 2 light hours," Lisa replied. "Then, Captain, they're sending us a message." In the engineering section of the ship, Ryan Clark looked up from the engine he was repairing. He was a big man with strong hands that were always covered in grease from working on the ship's systems. The message from the alien ship was being broadcast throughout the New Horizon, and every crew member stopped what they were doing to listen. The voice that came through the speakers was strange, with sounds that human throats could not make, but the translation system worked well enough to make the words clear. "Greetings, travelers from Earth. We are the Zephyrian Collective. We have been watching your species for many years, and we believe you are ready to meet others who share the stars with you. We wish to speak with you in peace." Dr. Amy Watson was in her laboratory when she heard the message. She was a small woman with red hair and green eyes, and she had spent her entire career studying life forms from other worlds. Most of the time, this meant looking at bacteria and simple plants that their ships had found on distant planets. She had never expected to study intelligent aliens. The meeting took place in the empty space between the 2 ships. Both vessels hung motionless in the void, their lights creating small islands of warmth in the endless cold. Morrison, Lisa, Ryan, and Amy took a shuttle across to the alien ship, where they were met by 3 Zephyrians in a chamber that seemed to be made entirely of crystal. Ambassador Velfinus was the tallest of the 3 aliens, with skin so clear that Morrison could see the strange blue liquid that flowed through his veins instead of blood. When he spoke, his voice was like music, and his words carried a kindness that made the humans feel welcome. "We greet you as friends," Valthanus said. "Your species has taken its first steps into the greater galaxy. We offer you knowledge, trade, and membership in the community of worlds that have learned to live in peace among the stars." The humans were amazed. Everything they had dreamed about since they first looked up at the night sky was coming true. They were not alone, and the beings they had met seemed wise and peaceful. Amy took readings of the aliens with her instruments, marveling at how different yet how wonderful they were. But as she studied the data flowing across her screens, something troubled her. The aliens were taking readings of the humans as well, and their scans went much deeper than simple curiosity would require. They were mapping human DNA, studying their brain patterns, and recording details about their bodies that seemed far too specific for a friendly first meeting. Amy said nothing, but she stored the data carefully. Something about this meeting felt wrong, though she could not yet understand what it was. 3 months had passed since first contact, and the galaxy seemed like a much friendlier place. Human ships now traveled to dozens of different worlds, carrying trade goods and eager diplomats. Captain Morrison had been promoted to serve as Earth's main representative to the alien civilizations, spending most of his time on Zephyr Prime, the crystal cities of the Zephyrian homeworld. The aliens had been more generous than anyone had dared to hope. They shared star maps that showed safe routes through dangerous regions of space. They provided technology that made human ships faster and more efficient. Most importantly, they offered friendship to a species that had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Morrison walked through the flowing corridors of the Zephyrian embassy, his footsteps echoing off walls that seemed to be carved from single pieces of colored glass. Ambassador Valthanus glided beside him, moving with the grace that all Zephyrians seemed to possess naturally. They were discussing the establishment of a new human colony in the Andromeda sector, a region rich in minerals that Earth desperately needed. "Your people adapt quickly to new environments," Valthanus observed, his musical voice carrying approval. "We have observed human colonies on 7 different worlds, and in each case, your species has found ways to thrive where others might struggle." Morrison felt proud of humanity's achievements, but something in the ambassador's tone made him pause. The way Valthanus said, "observed," suggested more than casual interest. It sounded like the aliens were studying human behavior rather than simply helping their new friends. Far from the diplomatic halls of Zephyr Prime, Dr. Amy Watson worked alone in her laboratory aboard the research station New Geneva. The station orbited a small moon in neutral space, where scientists from both human and alien worlds could work together on projects that benefited everyone. At least, that was what everyone believed. Amy stared at the data she had been collecting for weeks. Every human who spent time around alien technology was being scanned constantly. The aliens claimed these scans were for medical purposes, to make sure that contact between the species was safe for everyone. But the scans went far beyond anything needed for health monitoring. The aliens were mapping human genetic codes with a precision that amazed her. They were studying brain patterns during sleep, recording how humans responded to different types of stress, and even analyzing how human children develop differently when exposed to alien environments. This was not the casual study of a new friend. This was the detailed examination of a laboratory specimen. Amy had tried to discuss her concerns with other scientists, but most of them dismissed her worries. The aliens were helpful and kind. They had shared technology that would take humans centuries to develop on their own. Why would anyone question such generous gifts? On the far side of the station, Lisa Park was experiencing problems of her own. She had been assigned to work with alien navigation systems, learning how their ships could travel vast distances in what seemed like impossible amounts of time. The work was fascinating, but lately she had been having dreams that left her confused and frightened. In her dreams, she stood on the bridge of ships that were nothing like anything humans had ever built. The vessels in her dreams were huge, beyond imagination, with weapons that could destroy entire planets with a single shot. She commanded fleets of these ships, directing battles across star systems while alien worlds burned beneath her feet. The dreams felt more real than her waking life. When she touched the alien navigation controls, knowledge flowed into her mind. Without effort, she understood systems that should have taken years to learn, and she found herself making improvements to alien technology that surprised even her Zephyrian colleagues. Lisa was not the only human experiencing these changes. Reports came in from colonies and research stations across the galaxy. Humans who worked closely with alien technology were developing abilities that seemed impossible. Some could repair complex machines without training. Others could sense the approach of ships while they were still hours away. A few reported that they could understand alien languages without using translation devices. Dr. Kethver noticed these changes too, and they filled him with growing alarm. In his private laboratory on Zephyr Prime, he studied genetic samples taken from dozens of humans. What he found there made his translucent skin grow pale with fear. Human DNA was unlike anything he had ever seen. Most species in the galaxy had genetic codes that were stable and predictable. Evolution moved slowly for most races, taking millions of years to produce significant changes. But human genes contained sequences that lay dormant, waiting for something to activate them. Worse yet, these dormant sequences were responding to contact with alien technology. The technology that the Zephyrians and other races used throughout the galaxy was based on principles they had discovered in ancient ruins scattered across hundreds of worlds. These ruins were old beyond measure, left behind by a civilization that had vanished long before any current species had developed intelligence. Kethver made a discovery that chilled him to his core. The ancient technology in the ruins matched perfectly with the dormant sequences in human DNA. It was as if the humans had been designed to use this technology, as if their genetic code contained the blueprints for operating systems that were millions of years old. Back on Earth, strange things were beginning to happen. Ancient sites that archaeologists had studied for centuries were suddenly showing energy readings. Stone circles in England glowed softly in the night. Pyramids in Egypt hummed with power that had no known source. Underground chambers in Peru revealed themselves to be far more complex than anyone had realized. Dr. Watson received reports of these phenomena and began to understand the terrible truth. The alien technology that was awakening dormant human genes was also awakening something on Earth itself. The planet that humans called home was not the primitive world that everyone believed it to be. Meanwhile, Ambassador Velthanis was having private conversations with the leaders of the Zephyrian Collective. The High Council met in chambers deep beneath the surface of their homeworld, in rooms that had been carved from living rock millions of years before their civilization had learned to build cities. "The humans are not what we believe them to be," Velthanis reported to the assembled leaders. "Our initial assessment was wrong. They are not a primitive species that has recently developed space travel. They are something else entirely." The eldest member of the council, a being so old that his transparent skin had taken on the color of ancient amber, leaned forward in his floating chair. "Explain your concerns, Ambassador." "The technology we have shared with them is responding to their presence in ways we never expected," Velthanis continued. "They are not learning to use our systems. They are remembering how to use them, and the genetic scans suggest that they are capable of much more than they currently demonstrate." On the research station New Geneva, Amy Watson made a breakthrough. That would change everything. She had been studying the brain patterns of humans who worked with alien technology, and she noticed that the changes were not random. The humans were not developing new abilities. They were recovering old ones. The pattern was clear once she knew what to look for. Every human who spent time around the ancient technology showed the same genetic awakening. Dormant sections of their DNA were becoming active, unlocking capabilities that had been sleeping for thousands of years. Amy realized that humanity had not recently developed the ability to travel between stars. They had done it before, long ago, and then somehow lost that knowledge. The aliens had not discovered a primitive species ready to join the galactic community. They had awakened something that had been deliberately put to sleep. Ryan Clark had always been good with machines, but what happened in the engine room of the hybrid research vessel Discovery went far beyond anything he had experienced before. He was deep in the ship's core, working on a power coupling that connected human and alien systems, when his wrench slipped and his bare hand touched a piece of ancient technology that the Zephyrians claimed they had developed themselves. The moment his skin made contact with the crystalline surface, Ryan's world exploded into light and sound and memories that were not his own. He saw vast fleets of ships that dwarfed anything in the current galaxy, vessels built like floating cities that could house millions of people while traveling between distant stars. He saw weapons that could crack planets in half in technology, that bent space and time like clay in the hands of a sculptor, but most terrifying of all, he saw the faces of the beings who had built these impossible machines. They looked exactly like humans, but their eyes held a cold intelligence that made Ryan's blood freeze. These were not the peaceful explorers that humanity had always believed themselves to be. These were conquerors who had ruled the galaxy through fear and superior firepower. Ryan staggered backward from the alien device, his hand smoking where it had touched the crystal. The memories continued to flood through his mind, showing him battles that had torn apart entire star systems and technologies. That made the current galactic civilization look like children playing with toys. He tried to convince himself that what he had seen was just a hallucination caused by an electrical shock, but the knowledge that now filled his head was too detailed and too specific to be anything but real. Dr. Kethver was having his own revelation. In his laboratory on Zephyr Prime, the genetic samples he had been studying for months had finally revealed their secrets, and those secrets terrified him. Human DNA did not just contain dormant sequences that responded to ancient technology. It contained complete blueprints for abilities that no current species in the galaxy possessed. The dormant genes showed the capacity for enhanced physical strength, reaction times that were 10 times faster than normal, and most disturbing of all, the ability to interface directly with technology using only the power of thought. These were not random mutations or recent evolutionary developments. They were engineered capabilities, designed by someone who understood genetics far better than any current civilization. Kethver ran the same tests on his own DNA and the genetic material of every other known species in the galaxy. The results were shocking. Every other race showed the same basic genetic structure, with variations that had developed naturally over millions of years of evolution. Only humans were different. Only humans carried the marks of deliberate genetic manipulation. On Earth, the strange phenomena were becoming impossible to ignore. The ancient sites that had been glowing with mysterious energy were now affecting the people who lived near them. Farmers in England reported that they could sense the weather days in advance. Workers near the pyramids in Egypt found that they could lift objects that should have required heavy machinery. Children playing in the ruins of Machu Picchu began speaking in languages that had been dead for thousands of years. Dr. Amy Watson received reports from every continent, and the pattern was always the same. Humans who lived near the ancient sites were experiencing the same genetic awakening as those who worked with alien technology. The conclusion was unavoidable. The ancient sites on Earth were built using the same principles as the technology that the aliens had found in ruins across the galaxy. Lisa Park was no longer having dreams. The memories that came to her now arrived while she was wide awake, usually triggered by contact with the alien navigation systems she worked with every day. She saw herself commanding fleets of ships that stretched from horizon to horizon, directing military campaigns that conquered entire sectors of space with ruthless efficiency. The memories showed her a version of humanity that bore little resemblance to the peaceful explorers who had made first contact with the Zephyrians. These humans had been warriors without equal, possessing technology and tactical abilities that made them nearly unstoppable. They had not explored the galaxy out of curiosity. They had conquered it because conquest was their nature, but the most disturbing part of the memories was what they revealed about the end of human dominance. The great fleets had not been destroyed by enemy action or natural disaster. They had been deliberately abandoned. The humans, who had once ruled half the galaxy, had chosen to give up their power and disappear from known space. Ambassador Velthinus could no longer hide his growing fear from the other members of the Zephyrian collective. The High Council met in emergency session as reports poured in from across their territory. Wherever humans had established colonies or research stations, the ancient technology that formed the backbone of galactic civilization was responding to their presence in ways that defied all understanding. "We built our civilization on the ruins of whatever came before," Velthinus reported to the assembled leaders. "We found ancient technology scattered across hundreds of worlds and learned to copy it, though we never truly understood how it worked. We assumed that whoever built it had died out long ago, leaving only their machines behind." The eldest council member's amber-colored skin had grown even paler as he listened to the reports. "Are you suggesting that the humans are somehow connected to the builders of the ancient technology?" "I am suggesting something far worse," Velthinus replied. "I believe the humans are the builders. I believe they never died out at all. I believe they chose to hide." Ryan Clark found Captain Morrison in the captain's quarters of the Discovery, staring out at the stars through the large viewing window. Morrison looked tired, as if he had not slept in days, and when he turned to face Ryan, his eyes held a haunted expression that Ryan had never seen before. "Captain, we need to talk," Ryan said, closing the door behind him. "Something is happening to us, and I think the aliens know more about it than they're telling us." Morrison nodded slowly. "I've been having the memories too," he said quietly. "At first I thought I was going crazy, but they're too real to be hallucinations. The things I see, the knowledge that's coming back to me, it's like remembering something I had forgotten rather than learning something new." Ryan sat down across from his captain, noting that Morrison's hands were shaking slightly. "What do?" "You remember?" "War," Morrison said simply. "Endless war across the entire galaxy. Humans commanding fleets so large that they could blockade entire star systems. Weapons that could destroy planets and the knowledge of how to build them. We weren't explorers, Ryan. We were conquerors." The conversation was interrupted by an emergency. "Message from Earth." Dr. Watson's face appeared on the communication screen, and her expression was grim. "Captain, I need to speak with you immediately. I've made a discovery that changes everything we thought we knew about human history." "Go ahead, Doctor," Morrison replied. "The ancient sites on Earth are not just responding to the presence of alien technology," Watson reported. "They're communicating with each other, and they're sending signals into deep space toward regions that our star maps show as empty, but I don't think those regions are empty anymore." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of signals?" "Activation codes," Watson replied. "The sites on Earth are waking up technologies that have been dormant for thousands of years. And based on the power readings I'm getting, those technologies were designed for one purpose: war." As if summoned by Watson's words, Ryan felt another wave of memories crash over him. This time, he saw the truth that the awakening humans had been dreading. The great human civilization had not abandoned the galaxy because they had grown tired of conquest. They had left because they had encountered something that even their vast military power could not defeat. The memories showed him ships arriving from beyond the edge of the galaxy, vessels that seemed to be made of living darkness. They consumed everything they touched, turning entire star systems into empty void. The human fleets had fought them for centuries, using weapons that reshaped reality itself, but even their advanced technology could only slow the invaders down. In the end, the humans had made a choice that saved the galaxy but doomed themselves to obscurity. They had used their most advanced genetic engineering to suppress their own abilities and had hidden themselves on a primitive world at the edge of known space. They had hoped that by the time the dormant genes reactivated, their species would have evolved beyond the need for war, but now the ancient enemy was returning, and the galaxy was defenseless without the weapons that only awakened humans could build and use. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the great chamber on the neutral world of Harmony Station. their faces showing fear that none of them wanted to admit. The reports coming in from across the galaxy painted a picture that challenged everything they thought they knew about their own civilization. Dr. Kethver stood before the assembled delegates, his translucent skin flickering with nervous energy, as he presented findings that would reshape their understanding of galactic history. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, "we face a crisis that goes far beyond the simple matter of integrating a new species into our community." The holographic displays around the chamber showed star maps with hundreds of red markers, each one indicating a location where human contact had triggered unexpected responses from ancient technology. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Wherever humans went, the old machines awakened. "The humans are not a primitive species that recently developed space travel," Kethver continued. "They are the descendants of the beings who built the foundation technology that our entire civilization depends upon. The ruins we found on countless worlds, the advanced systems we learned to copy but never truly understood, they all bear the genetic signature of human origin." A delegate from the crystalline Azuran Empire raised one of her four arms. "Are you suggesting that humans built our civilization?" "I am suggesting that humans built the technology our civilization is based upon," Kethver replied. "Every major system we use, from faster-than-light travel to planetary defense networks, is derived from ruins left behind by what we now know was a human empire that spanned most of the galaxy." Dr. Amy Watson was no longer on the research station, New Geneva. She had returned to Earth when the ancient sites began showing activity levels that threatened to overwhelm every monitoring system on the planet. Standing in the control center beneath the pyramids of Egypt, she watched displays that showed energy readings beyond anything in recorded human history. "The sites are not just communicating with each other anymore," she reported to Captain Morrison via subspace communication. "They're building something. The energy pattern suggests construction on a massive scale, but I can't determine what they're building or where." Morrison received her transmission while standing in the ruins of what had once been a Zephyrian research facility on the world of Kepler-7. The facility had been abandoned 3 days earlier when the ancient technology buried beneath the planet's surface had suddenly activated, creating energy fields that were lethal to all non-human life forms. "Amy, I need you to access the deepest levels of the pyramid complex," Morrison said, his voice tight with urgency. "Ryan's memory suggests that there are command centers buried beneath the surface, control rooms that were designed to coordinate activities across the entire galaxy." Morrison was no longer the simple starship captain who had made first contact with the Zephyrians. The awakening memories had changed him, filling his mind with knowledge of military tactics and strategic planning that spanned star systems. He understood now why the aliens were afraid. The sleeping giant that was humanity was beginning to wake up, and when it was fully conscious, it would be capable of things that the current galactic civilization could not imagine, Lisa Park commanded. A human vessel that bore little resemblance to the ship she had originally served on. The New Horizon had been transformed by technology that seemed to grow rather than be installed, creating systems that responded to her thoughts as quickly as her own hands responded to her will. The ship was no longer just a vehicle for traveling between stars. It had become an extension of her consciousness, a weapon that could strike targets across interstellar distances with precision that defied the laws of physics. Standing on the bridge that had reshaped itself to match her memories of command centers from humanity's forgotten past, Lisa watched tactical displays that showed the movements of alien fleets across nearby star systems. The Zephyrians and their allies were pulling back from regions where humans had established a presence, abandoning colonies and research stations that represented centuries of development. "They're afraid of us," said the officer at the navigation station, a young man named Peter Hayes, whose own awakening memories had made him an expert in stellar cartography, despite having no formal training in the subject. "They're treating us like an invasion force." Lisa nodded, understanding the aliens' fear but also recognizing that their withdrawal was making the situation worse. "They don't understand that we're not their enemy," she said. At least not yet. The qualification in her statement troubled her. The memories that continued to flood her mind showed her versions of herself that were capable of ruthless decisions in the name of galactic security. The humans who had once ruled this galaxy had not been evil, but they had been willing to sacrifice anything and anyone to protect the civilization they had built. Ambassador Velthanus found himself in the impossible position of trying to explain to his own people why their civilization was collapsing around them. The technology that had made the Zephyrian Collective one of the most advanced species in the galaxy was no longer under their control. Navigation systems rerouted ships to destinations they had not programmed. Defensive networks activated without authorization. Communication arrays transmitted messages in languages that had been dead for millennia. The humans are not deliberately attacking us, he explained to the emergency council that now met every few hours to deal with the latest crisis. They are simply returning to their natural relationship with technology that they designed millions of years ago. The systems recognize them as their rightful operators and are responding accordingly. The eldest council member looked even more ancient than usual, his amber skin now almost gray with exhaustion. Can we negotiate with them? Can we find some way to coexist? I believe we can, Velthanus replied, though his voice carried less certainty than his words suggested. But only if we can convince them that we are not a threat to whatever it is they are trying to accomplish. Ryan Clark had found the answers they were looking for in the deepest memory banks of the Discovery's hybrid systems. The ancient human civilization had not simply conquered the galaxy through superior firepower. They had been created as a weapon, genetically engineered by an even older civilization to fight an enemy that existed beyond the normal boundaries of space and time. The Void Devourers, he whispered, reading the name from data files that were older than recorded history. They come from outside our reality, from spaces between the dimensions where different rules apply. They consume everything they touch, turning matter and energy into nothingness. The files showed him images that made his sanity strain at its limits. Ships that seemed to be made of living darkness, fleets that existed in multiple dimensions. Simultaneously, weapons that could unmake the fundamental forces that held the universe together. The humans had fought them for millions of years, developing technology that pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible, but even human. Science had not been enough to permanently defeat an enemy that could simply step outside of reality when threatened. The war had been a stalemate that devastated entire galactic clusters and threatened to tear apart the fabric of space itself. Dr. Watson's exploration of the pyramid's deepest levels revealed the truth that explained everything. Standing in a command center that was larger than most cities, surrounded by displays that showed the status of ancient installations across hundreds of thousands of worlds, she finally understood what the awakening humans were preparing for. The Void Devourers operate on cycles that span millions of years, she reported to Morrison and the other awakened humans. They consume a galaxy, then retreat to digest what they have taken while the universe repairs itself. The cycle is beginning again, and the automated systems left behind by our ancestors have detected the signs. Morrison felt the final pieces of the puzzle fall into place. That's why the genetic awakening is happening now. It's not because we made contact with alien technology. It's because the ancient enemy is returning, and the systems our ancestors built are calling us back to our original purpose. The truth was more terrible than anyone had imagined. Humanity had not chosen to suppress their own abilities out of a desire for peace. They had done it because they knew that the weapon they had been created to be was too dangerous to exist when there was no enemy to fight. They had sacrificed their own civilization to prevent themselves from becoming the very thing they had been designed to destroy, but now the choice was being taken away from them. The galaxy needed its guardians again, and the awakening could not be stopped. The split in humanity began with a single transmission that reached every awakened human across the galaxy simultaneously. Lisa Park stood on the bridge of her transformed vessel, now calling itself the Eternal Vigil, as the message burned itself into her consciousness with the force of absolute certainty. The communication did not come through normal channels but spoke directly to the genetic memories that had been sleeping in human DNA for millions of years. "Children of the Dominion," the voice said, speaking in harmonies that no human throat could produce but that every awakened mind understood perfectly. The cycle turns again. The devourers stir in the spaces between worlds. You have served your exile with honor, but duty calls you home. Reclaim what was always yours. Lisa felt the truth of those words resonate through every cell in her body. The galaxy had never belonged to the Zephyrians or any of the other species that currently called it home. They were caretakers at best, children playing with toys they did not understand. The rightful inheritors of galactic civilization were awakening, and it was time to take their place at the head of the cosmic order. Around her, the crew of the Eternal Vigil underwent the same revelation. Their eyes now glowed with an inner light that had not been seen in the galaxy for millions of years, and when they spoke, their voices carried the authority of beings who had been designed to command fleets and reshape worlds according to their will. "Set course for Zephyr Prime," Lisa commanded, her voice carrying new harmonics that made the ship's systems respond with eager obedience. "It's time to reclaim our inheritance." Captain Morrison felt the same call, but his response was very different. Standing in the command center beneath the Egyptian pyramids, surrounded by displays that showed the awakening of human installations across the galaxy, he struggled against the genetic programming that urged him to embrace his species' true nature. "We can't do this," he said to Dr. Watson, who was monitoring the global awakening from her position at the primary control console. "If we give in to what we were designed to be, we'll become everything that the galaxy fears. Will become the very weapon that our ancestors tried to eliminate." Watson looked up from her screens, her own eyes showing the first signs of the genetic changes that were spreading through the human population. "But Jake, what if we don't have a choice? The readings I'm getting from deep space sensors suggest that the void devourers are already moving toward our galaxy. If we don't activate the Dominion's defensive systems, everyone dies." Morrison knew she was right, but he also remembered the final memories that Ryan Clark had uncovered in the discoveries. Ancient databanks. The human Dominion had not just been a military force. It had been a civilization built entirely around the concept of war, one that had difficulty distinguishing between enemies and innocent bystanders when the fighting became intense. Ryan Clark was experiencing his own internal battle in the engineering section of the Discovery, which had transformed itself into something that looked more like a fortress than a research vessel. The ancient systems were offering him knowledge that would make him the most powerful engineer in the galaxy, the ability to build weapons that could crack reality itself and defenses that could protect entire star systems from any conceivable threat. The temptation was overwhelming. He could feel the genetic programming urging him to accept his role as one of the guardian engineers who would rebuild the Dominion's military infrastructure. All he had to do was stop fighting the awakening and let his true nature emerge. But Ryan also remembered the cost of that power. The memory showed him what the Dominion had become during the final years of the war against the Void Devourers. Faced with an enemy that threatened the existence of all life in the galaxy, they had made decisions that sacrificed entire species to gain tactical advantages. They had become so focused on victory that they had forgotten what they were fighting to protect across the galaxy. The other species watched in growing terror as human colonies and installations transformed themselves overnight. The peaceful trading posts and research stations that had been established after first contact were revealing themselves to be something far more sinister. Dr. Kethver transmitted his final report to the Galactic Council from his laboratory on Zephyr Prime, even as the planet's ancient defense systems began responding to the approaching human fleet. "The awakening is accelerating beyond our most pessimistic projections," he reported. "Human genetic changes that should have taken years to complete are happening in hours. More disturbing, the humans seem to be developing two distinct factions." Ambassador Velfinus watched the tactical displays that showed Lisa Park's fleet approaching their homeworld. The ships moved with a coordination that spoke of shared consciousness, changing formation and adjusting course with a precision that no known military force could match. Even worse, their vessels were generating energy signatures that registered as impossible on Zephyrian instruments. "Can we negotiate with them?" asked the eldest council member, though his voice carried little hope. "I believe we can negotiate with some of them," Velfinus replied. "The faction led by Captain Morrison seems to be fighting against their genetic programming, trying to find a peaceful solution. But the group approaching our world appears to have fully embraced their nature as the galaxy's dominant military force." The first test of humanity's awakened power came when Lisa Park's fleet reached the outer defenses of Zephyr Prime. The planet was protected by energy shields and automated weapon systems that had been built using technology reverse-engineered from Dominion ruins. In theory, the defenses should have been able to repel any attack. Lisa did not order her ships to fire on the defensive installations. Instead, she simply transmitted a series of commands that the ancient systems recognized as legitimate authorization codes. The shields deactivated themselves and the weapon platforms powered down, leaving Zephyr Prime completely defenseless. "As I thought," Lisa said, her voice carrying the cold satisfaction of someone whose expectations had been confirmed. "They built their entire civilization using our tools, but they never understood that those tools would always recognize their true masters." Morrison received word of Zephyr Prime's surrender while he was still trying to convince other awakened humans to resist their genetic programming. The news filled him with dread because he understood what it meant. If Lisa's faction could take control of the galaxy's most advanced civilization without firing a shot, they could do the same thing everywhere else. "We have to stop them," he told Watson and the small group of humans who were still fighting against the awakening. "If we let them fully reactivate the Dominion systems, there won't be anything left of the galaxy we're trying to protect." But even as he spoke, Morrison could feel his own resistance weakening. The genetic memories were becoming stronger every hour, and they carried not just knowledge but emotions and instincts that had been shaped by millions of years of warfare. Part of him wanted to join Lisa's faction, to embrace the power that was his birthright and take his place as one of the galaxy's rightful rulers. Dr. Watson made a discovery that changed everything when she accessed the deepest archives beneath the pyramids. Hidden in databanks that required awakened human consciousness to access, she found records of the Dominion's final decision to go into exile. "They didn't just suppress their own abilities," she told Morrison with excitement and horror in her voice. "They built safeguards into the awakening process, genetic locks that were supposed to prevent exactly what's happening now. Someone or something has been tampering with human DNA, accelerating the awakening and removing the control mechanisms that were supposed to keep us from becoming monsters." Morrison felt a chill of understanding. The transmission that started Lisa's faction down this path, it didn't come from Dominion systems, it came from outside the galaxy. The truth was more terrifying than any of them had imagined. The Void Devourers had not simply waited for the cycle to turn. They had been actively working to corrupt humanity's safeguards, turning the galaxy's protectors into the very weapons that would deliver it into their hands. Ryan Clark confirmed their worst fears when he detected the source of the corrupting signal. "It's coming from dark space, from the region between galaxies where the Devourers wait between feeding cycles," he reported. "They've been broadcasting a modified awakening sequence for decades, probably since we first developed faster than light travel. They want us to become the monsters that will destroy the galaxy for them." Morrison realized that they faced an impossible choice. If they suppressed the awakening completely, the galaxy would be defenseless when the Void Devourers arrived. But if they allowed it to continue, humanity would become the weapon that would destroy everything they were trying to protect. The only solution was to find a middle path, to awaken just enough of humanity's true nature to fight the coming threat, while maintaining enough control to prevent them from becoming the galaxy's new oppressors. But that would require sacrifices that no one wanted to make. And Morrison was not sure that enough humans would be willing to pay the price that such a solution would demand. The final revelation came when Dr. Watson accessed the deepest memory cores beneath the Great Pyramid, diving into archives that had been sealed for millions of years. What she found there was not just the history of the human dominion, but the terrible truth about why they had been created in the first place. We weren't the first, she transmitted to Morrison and the other humans who were still fighting against their genetic programming. The species that built us, they called themselves the Architects. They created the Dominion as a weapon against the Void Devourers, but they knew that any civilization capable of fighting such an enemy would inevitably become a threat to everyone else. Morrison stood in the command center watching displays. That showed Lisa Park's faction taking control of star system after star system with effortless ease. The awakened humans were not conquering through violence. They were simply reclaiming technology that had always belonged to them, and the other species of the galaxy could do nothing to stop them. The Architects built safeguards into our genetic code, Watson continued. We were designed to be capable of extreme violence when necessary, but also programmed to recognize when that violence was no longer needed. The problem is that the Void Devourers have been corrupting those safeguards for thousands of years, preparing for this moment. Ryan Clark confirmed the worst of their fears from his position aboard the Discovery, which had become a mobile weapons platform capable of destroying entire fleets. I'm detecting movement at the edge of the galaxy, he reported. The Devourers are coming, and they're bringing something new with them. The sensor readings suggest ships that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Morrison felt the weight of an impossible decision settling on his shoulders. He could allow the awakening to continue and watch humanity become the monsters that would terrorize the galaxy for millions of years. Or he could try to stop it and leave everyone defenseless against an enemy that could unmake reality itself. There's a third option, Watson said, as if reading his thoughts. The Architects included one final safeguard in our genetic code, a way to activate our warrior capabilities temporarily while maintaining the ability to return to dormancy once the threat is eliminated. What's the cost? Morrison asked, though he already suspected he would not like the answer. Most of the awakened humans won't survive the transition back, Watson replied quietly. The genetic changes required to fight the Void Devourers are too extreme for normal human biology to handle permanently. We can become what we need to be to save the galaxy, but we can't remain that way without losing everything that makes us human. Morrison understood what she was asking of him. He would have to convince people to embrace a transformation that would give them godlike power, knowing that most of them would die when that power was taken away. It was the ultimate sacrifice, and he was not sure that anyone would be willing to make it. The decision was taken out of his hands when the first Void Devourer scouts reached the outer edge of the galaxy. Lisa Park's faction detected them immediately, and for the first time since her awakening, Morrison heard uncertainty in her voice when she transmitted a galaxy-wide message. All human forces, this is Lisa Park of the Eternal Vigil, her voice carried across every communication channel in known space. The enemy has arrived, and they are not what our ancestral memories prepared us for. These Devourers have evolved since the last cycle. They've learned from their previous encounters with the Dominion. Morrison watched the tactical displays with growing horror as the first engagement between awakened humans and Void Devourers unfolded. Lisa's ships, weapons that could have conquered the entire current galaxy without effort, barely managed to slow down the attackers. The Devourers had indeed evolved, developing defenses against the very technologies that had once held them at bay. Jake, we need the full awakening, Lisa transmitted directly to Morrison, her earlier arrogance replaced by desperate urgency. Everything we've recovered so far isn't enough. We need access to the deepest levels of Dominion technology, the weapons that exist only in genetic memory. Morrison made his choice with the weight of galactic survival pressing down on him. Amy, initiate the full awakening protocol, he ordered. All safeguards off. Give us everything the Dominion was capable of. Consequences be damned. Watson's fingers moved across controls that had been waiting millions of years for this moment. Across the galaxy, every human with awakened genes felt the final locks on their genetic code dissolve. Knowledge flooded into their minds, not just of technology and tactics, but of sciences that bent the fundamental laws of physics to their will, Ryan Clark screamed as information that human brains were never designed to hold burned itself into his consciousness. He understood now how to build weapons that could cut holes in space-time itself, defenses that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, and most importantly, how to coordinate the actions of millions of individual humans into a single, galaxy-spanning organism dedicated to war. The transformation was not limited to those who had already awakened. Every human in the galaxy felt the change as dormant genetic sequences activated with explosive force. Children in schools suddenly understood mathematics that had challenged the greatest minds of their civilization. Farmers looked up at the stars and instinctively knew the location of every void devourer ship in the galaxy. Elderly people who had never shown interest in technology began building devices that could manipulate matter at the subatomic level, but the cost was exactly what Watson had predicted. Human bodies that had evolved to handle normal biology began breaking down under the strain of containing consciousness that spanned star systems. Morrison felt his own flesh beginning to fail as his mind expanded to coordinate defensive efforts across thousands of worlds simultaneously. "How long do we have?" he asked Watson, though he could see the answer in the cellular degradation readings that his enhanced awareness provided automatically. "Hours for most people," she replied, her own voice showing the strain of transformation. "Days for those of us who awaken gradually. Maybe weeks for the strongest." The battle that followed would be remembered by the surviving species of the galaxy as the War of Extinction, though it lasted only 72 hours from beginning to end. The Void Devourers came in numbers that darkened entire star systems, their ships existing in multiple realities simultaneously and wielding weapons that turned matter into nothingness, with casual ease, but they had never faced the fully awakened human dominion, and for all their evolution, they were not prepared for an enemy that could match their own mastery of dimensional warfare. Lisa Park commanded fleets that existed across parallel universes, striking at devourer vessels from angles that had no names in any language. Ryan Clark built weapons that could target the quantum foundations of reality itself, unmaking entire devourer formations by convincing the universe that they had never existed in the first place. Morrison found himself coordinating the actions of every awakened human as if they were cells in a single vast organism. He felt the deaths of thousands of his people as their bodies failed under the strain of transformation, but he also felt their willingness to make that sacrifice to protect a galaxy they had called home. The end came when the awakened humans activated the final Dominion weapon, a device that had been built but never used during the original war. It reached across dimensional barriers to strike at the Void Devourers in their home reality, not just defeating their current invasion, but severing their ability to return to this galaxy for millions of cycles to come. The victory was complete, but the cost was everything Morrison had feared. Of the billions of humans who had undergone the full awakening, fewer than 1,000 survived the transition back to normal biology. Lisa Park died with a smile on her face, her last words expressing gratitude that she had been able to serve as she was intended. Ryan Clark lasted long enough to ensure that the most dangerous Dominion technologies were safely destroyed before his consciousness finally fragmented beyond repair. Dr. Watson was among the few who survived, though the experience left her fundamentally changed. Standing in the ruins of the command center beneath the Great Pyramid, she initiated the final protocol that the architects had built into human genetic code. Millions of years before, the memories of the awakening faded from human consciousness like dreams upon waking. The few thousand survivors retained enough knowledge to rebuild human civilization and prepare for the day when they might be needed again. But the majority of humanity returned to their peaceful existence with no memory of what they had briefly become. Ambassador Valthenis stood before the rebuilt Galactic Council months later, delivering a speech that would define how the galaxy remembered the events that had nearly destroyed them all. "Humanity's darkest secret," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber to representatives of species that had barely survived to see this day, was not their capacity for violence or their history of conquest. It was their willingness to sacrifice themselves completely to protect those who could not protect themselves. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity for all the wrong reasons. They had been terrified of human power and human ambition.